love when it's unrequited is it sucks, honestly. And I think if anybody is humble enough, they can think of at least one experience where they have been really into somebody. Now, it doesn't even have to be that the person was, full on romantic, relationship. It could be that you're crushing on somebody, the person just couldn't see you, or you had a friendship, you had a friend situationship with somebody and they saw you as a brother or a sister in Christ. There are all these very weird and diverse situations that we find ourselves in where you have specific feelings for somebody, and those feelings come with specific expectations in terms of how you want to be treated, how you want that relationship to go, the value you want to derive from the relationship, and where you see yourself being with that person. And sadly, more often than not, we find that sometimes those relationships just never reach that potential. So let's get into this topic of love that doesn't end the way we imagine it to be, love that doesn't have the fairy tale ending, love that bleeds, love that hurts, and love that basically doesn't feel like love. Let's get into it. So today I want to start this conversation by taking us back. I've actually tried to think about what my first encounter or thoughts or semblance of love was. And when I say love, I mean romantic love. So not the love that I got as a child from my parents or my family. But when I started to think about love or feeling that, you knew that you were different from boys and you felt some type of way about a boy. And when I think back, I believe I was in class 2. And this means that I was about 7 years old. I remember that there was a competition of sorts that, we had going on in our school. And it was called Miss Class 2. So, no, actually, Mr. and Miss Class 2. So it's a pageant for second graders, if you'd like to call them, depending on your culture or school experience. So these are 7-year-olds, basically mixed school, little boys and little girls, outside of our obviously regular academic life and schedules. I believe it was the end of term, so it was something that we did just before we went off on holiday for the summer. And this pageant was called Mr. and Miss Class 2. And in this pageant, basically they select or choose girls. I think we were about 10 girls, 10 boys. And we go through, the different things that happen in a typical pageant. So there's like an introduction side, there's the catwalk modeling thing, there's a talent show, there's the questions, and then we have the winner. So you have your crown title, Mr. and Miss Class 2. Now, I do not remember specifically how the process of choosing was, like how we auditioned or what we had to do. But I found myself in this pageant competing with other girls in my class and, other boys trying to win this Miss Class 2 title. Um, Again, I don't even remember what I did for talent or any of these, other crazy things that we were doing. But what I do remember is that when I made it to the finals and there were 3 of us, I was silently, like in my little heart, rooting for a specific boy to win, even more than I was hoping to win. And my whole thing as a 7-year-old little girl is there's no point of me winning if it's going to be that other guy winning too. So, as much as I was invested in my own win, I was also heavily counting on this other little gentleman to win so that we then become Mr. and Miss Class 2. And I thought, I had this beautiful little picture in my mind. They'll give us our crowns. I'll have a sash. And we, we'll sit together and whatnot. And, this was such an ideal, like beautiful little simple fairy tale in my mind. And yes, the story develops and I do go on to win, but the guy that I wanted to win did not win. And here I was paired with this other boy. Um, and I had to fake the smile and, being happy and wearing the crown and holding hands. And I think for the whole day, we were meant to like do all these celebratory things together. And my little heart was so disappointed. But I connect to this story now because for me, I think as a 7-year-old girl, that was my first experience of unrecruited love in some way. Now, I know it's a bit stretched considering, there were no actual feelings involved or whatever, but I'm tapping into and recollecting the disappointment in it not being this guy. And also feeling like the guy that I wanted to win didn't even see me. Like, he was not even jealous that I was with the other boy who won, and he was also happy and congratulating his friend and things. And I'm like, no, this is meant to be us. So, fast track, obviously, years and years have gone by since this little scenario incident. And I have gone through very different, varied stages of experiencing love, experiencing heartbreak, understanding heartbreak, and most importantly, figuring out how to move forward, move past these relationships that don't end well. Almost, no, I think I should phrase it better, relationships that don't last forever, because I think that's the idealistic mindsets we have when we're in a relationship. Everybody invests with the mindset that it's never going to end. This is your person. And when you find somebody that makes you feel like you're in the right place, it feels good, it's gratifying to you, it's edifying, you're growing, you're happy. You never want that to end. And the idea is that it shouldn't. But yeah, life really teaches us that it's not always the case. And sometimes we find ourselves on the other side of the card. So basically, in this episode, I really just want to get into some of the things that really lead to us being on the other end and how to also pick yourself up and move. Because again, we're hoping to be able to provide some value, some restoration, some comfort to anybody going through, navigating, figuring out how to get out of that dark place that can be heartbreak. Okay, so basically, from the song that I was playing, Rihanna's Love on the Brain, it basically goes into what the turmoil and heartache looks like for, a woman. We're visualizing to be a young woman, deeply invested in a relationship with this person, and it's just not getting the cards that she desires to have played. And this person is disappointed. This person feels lost. Her heart is broken. She is crushed. And, it comes with just a lot of, feelings of despair. Like, you don't know how to move forward from that point. So we can imagine this to typically be a romantic relationship. This must be somebody that you're dating. However, I think as adults now, we can think back and realize that there are actually different kinds of love and different kinds of relationships that you can equally experience some form of disappointment and heartbreak in. And I think even relationship with our parents, there are some people who have quite complex relationships with their parents. You'd find that in typical African households, I think a lot of fathers, especially from our generation, were on, a slightly different end of the ballpoint from the mothers. The mothers were, more present, more doting, more connecting. And most people have rather difficult relationships with their fathers in terms of being able to really feel loved, being able to receive love vocally and, expressively. But it's not a one size fits all thing. There are some families also where maybe the mother wasn't even present and the father raised them. However, I do speak to the generalization that most of the time you would find that the men in African households and African culture, as we grew up in, were not as expressive in their, you know, effort to show love and show that, I care for you as my child. And there are a lot of girls who grew up from that space of not feeling loved enough. And unfortunately, the downside of that is as an adolescent or as a young lady, you tend to have your radar almost, set from the jump because you are lacking in this regard. and it puts an even higher expectancy on your relationships, your partners, the people that you find yourself, surrounded by. And what then happens is that women who are in romantic relationships now tend to have even higher expectations of their romantic partners. And I spoke about the parent angle because I'm trying to bring our minds back to the fact that there are different kinds of relationships that we can suffer, an equal yoke from. Some people have it with their siblings. You may not feel necessarily connected, you may feel a bit left out. Um, some have it even with their friends, being growing out of certain friend groups. You may find that two out of the group have developed their friendship. You're left on the side, not really feeling, a balance in the energies, a balance in the commitment to you, being left out of things and all of that. But massively, I think where the most commonalities lie would be romantic relationships. Because I think as women, that's where we invest the hardest. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think women love hard. Like when a woman finds a man that she thinks is the one, she's putting her heart, her soul, her money, her energy, her life's earnings, like sweat, tears, everything is going in there. And the downside of that is when you put in a lot and you don't get much out of it, it turns you into something else. And I'm not gonna lie that that's, difficult. It's a really difficult place to be in. So I've tried to kind of chronicle my personal life in terms of love and relationships. And I think I've actually been very lucky and fortunate because I've not had heartbreak, like a lot of heartbreak. I know when we were at school, like in high school, there were always, I think I've always been somebody that people trust. Like, she was someone that, a friend can easily come up to and say, this is what has happened. Akosi was in school and then I got this letter and I found out that he's seeing this girl and I'm comforting one person or the other in one way or the other. But in my personal space, I have not directly dealt with heartbreak from the angle of, adolescence expression. I think that my first actual encounter with heartbreak was somewhere in, I think, 2014, if I'm correct, 2014, 2015, thereabout. And in this relationship, I had literally like poured out myself, very, promising relationship. I think I dare say one of the best, instant connections of my lifetime. Everything just felt so good, so easy, so natural, so like everything that I'm looking for. It was just right from the jump. First conversation, and I was all in. He could have said, "Let's move to um swimming," and I'll be there like the next day. I'll drop everything and go. No offense to anybody who listens to me, but my point is I was like all in from day one. Now this relationship did progress. It was a 4-year relationship, I believe, 4 years. And it was a good relationship. We, got to know each other very quickly. It felt very natural very quickly. So things progressed very quickly. However, it became a very complex relationship in the sense that my personal and inherent expectations as a woman were always met. Like I never felt unloved. There was like an overdose of expression of love that was there, like 110%. I always felt cared for. I always felt seen. I always had his time. I always had the attention I wanted. The physical attraction and energy was there. The chemistry was there. Commitment was somewhat there. It was there, but once in a while there'll be a wave of something and then you're a bit shaken like, is everything okay? But for the most part, like even our communication, like we would speak about things, get to the bottom of things. It was a very honest and I would say challenging in the sense that I was like really forced to sweep away some of the baseless, romanticized, expressions of love that we're used to from movies and fairy tales that we don't even realize influence our conscious expectations and relationships. And I was now brought to a side where I knew that your partner, for example, disappointing you or faltering by maybe being flirty with a girl is something that can happen and something that you should be ready and willing to speak about, to communicate about, and most importantly, get through. I think that for the most part, we build a very myopic and like unpractical expectation of our relationships where we expect our partners to be angelic. Like, you cannot have any kind of bad thoughts. You must see every woman as a stick on the road. Like, all women are trees. They cannot see beauty except yours. They cannot see, anything desirable about anybody else. Their expression of, how they feel about people are always going to be 100% all the time. Their communication when you're present and when you're absent is going to be 100% all the time. You're constantly going to be on the forefront of their mind. They will never disrespect you in the slightest way. They will never, flirt with anybody or give anybody any impression that they're interested. Like, all these things should be there, and all the time we would have that. But we find that that's really not the case because men are men, and also because men are human. And I want to lean more into the fact that men are human than to say men are men, because that's a whole conversation for another day. But that relationship really made me grow because here I was, being used to things like if I see some shady message on your phone, I'm calling you out and like I'm not talking to you for 1 week and just like get the hell out. Like, I'm not interested. I'm angry. I'm upset. Like, how dare you? Or on a bad day, maybe we're even going to call the girl out or text her, like, why are you, talking to my person this way? And all these wild things that do happen on the streets, right? But in this relationship, there was a lot of maturity that I was forced to comply to. And it wasn't in a negative way. It was in a very healthy way because communication was, you know, key. Like, all the time, he was willing to break things down, to explain himself, to admit where he's been wrong, to listen to how I feel, to hear me out, to apologize when needed, and most of the time, to promise to never do that again. Now, you find that in a situation like this, you can feel quite empowered by this love story and the evolution of it being that, oh, yes, things do go wrong. But as the person own up to it, do they rise to the challenge? Do they accept they're wrong? And I know that most women have the tendency to, like, we'll forgive you for what you'll be honest about. Sometimes the weight of the disappointment and the, what word can I even use? The hate or feelings of, sadness and vindictiveness that comes is because you're being lied to and nobody wants to feel like someone else thinks they're a fool or you're playing them. So when you're in a space where you get honesty and there's a seeming willingness to improve and work on themselves, you find that a lot of women would, try and work with that because we see that as progress. Now, to cut a very long story short, I'm kind of rambling here because I've, painted this nice picture of a progressive relationship. But why is this relevant in this conversation we're having? Because it turned really sour. And the main thing was that there were repeated instances of this, reformation. So you do one thing, you're willing to talk about it, we go over this, and then it happens again. And then we talk about it, we embrace our wrong, and then it happens again, and again, and again, and again, and again. To the points where I'm like, okay, I need to sit up. It's not the fact that you're apologetic or you understand that you've done wrong, but the fact that this is a vicious cycle that, only keeps happening and keeps repeating itself. And it seemed like a never ending tunnel I would be building castles in the air if I just sat and waited for you to actually change. And I find that that then becomes the commonality with most other most relationships. It may not be doing the wrong thing and admitting to it, but most of the time you would find that we find ourselves in spaces where there are different cycles of abuse. And I use abuse in the sense of basically just infringing on your partner's hopes, expectations, or trust in you as a partner. And so many people do this in different ways. I think the ones that we're most used to hearing about would be lying, cheating. I think lying and cheating are up there, like right up there at the top. I can't even think of any others. But they're the more uncommon and unpopular ones, like maybe elevating themselves, like, acting like they're bigger than they are, or they're doing more than they are. Or we have some instances where some people are not committed enough. And that kind of also ties down to other things that they're doing, which end up leading to lying and cheating, really. And that, cycle of feeling unappreciated, feeling unvalued, and being hurt by your partner is something that's difficult to intercept and to process, right? And it can be a lonely place. It can be a place that looks bleak, like there's no way out of this. And I find also that most of the time when we think about how to move on, we're always held back by how much time we've spent. So you find yourself, thinking about the fact that you've sacrificed, maybe I've been in this for 3 years, we've done this and that. You may have spent money, you may have introduced them to family, you may have given up on opportunities, you may have let other, prospective partners even go. So you then start to rationalize it in your mind why you need to, stay in this relationship, or why you need to be in this place, or why you need to make this thing work. And it's not a pleasant place to be. It's a really difficult place to be, but it takes courage. It takes, one step in the right direction. And you find that you put yourself in a place that is just better for you, for your mental health, for your life, and for your journey of love. I think it's a very natural thing for us to feel like, our relationship should be like our jobs. If you put in 100%, the likelihood is that you will get 100% in terms of result. Unfortunately, it's not the same, because when you're dealing with human beings, when you're dealing with somebody else, it's not so much. Of course, what you put in is important, but it does not necessarily equate what you get back. And that is the gamble of love. That is the beauty of love. The fact that it's not, static in its formula. There's no method to it. It moves in waves. It goes how it wants, and you really just have to bet on it and hope for the best, I dare say. But when you're on the unfortunate side where you're not seeing, the result, loving somebody and not feeling loved is not a pleasant thing. And this happens more than you would think. So really, why does love have to be complex? Why does finding somebody that you think, you're into, gives you all the good feels, you have great intentions for, you're receiving some back, like where does it go south, and why does it have to go south? I'm thinking about this and still trying to decode. And it's just taking my mind to a place where girl meets boy, everything looks good. I have my, expectations and intentions and motivations for being in the relationship down. The guy also has his, intentions and motivations and all that down. I think that the baseline of where we need to even look at this picture is the conversations that we have going in, because I find that most of the time, the right conversations are not even had. So a lot of generalizations and assumptions are made from the get-go. Some people are together and each of them have like a completely different reason or motivation for the relationship. clearly it's a false start. It's very unlikely that that relationship progresses and progresses the right way. I'm currently watching Love is Blind, season 8, I believe. And I was having a conversation with my brother-in-law, and he was just disgusted that I watched the show. He's like, but I thought you were smart. Like, why do you watch Love is Blind? And I'm like, listen, sit down, like, take a seat and let me educate you. Because anybody who has, the mindset or the mentality that, reality TV, these love shows, these things are just fickle, small-minded entertainment is wrong. There's so much, unconscious and conscious learning that goes on in these shows. For the most part, they're actually social experiments. And I watch them, yes, for the entertainment value, but I find that there's so many learning opportunities there if you're paying attention. Now, I speak about Love is Blind because I think that there's an inherent value in the fact that because they're not able to see each other, because they are confined in a space to basically explore their connections. They are first mentally, emotionally, psychologically, physically to bring themselves to the place where they're fully trying to understand who they are as people, who the other person is, and what they're both looking for. They're also even pushing further to see how their lives fit, how their motivations fit, how their values fit, how their quests and perception for life fit, how even what they're looking for, what they think their partner should be fit. And I feel like that in itself is a template for a successful relationship. So seeing that force dynamic in that place where you throw, two different groups of people together, or even if it's two individuals together and say, sit down, sit with your thoughts, and honestly express without inhibition, without fear of judgment, without shame, without feeling like you're materialistic, without feeling like a gold digger, without feeling like you're desperate, and all these other, inhibitions that are in the minds of women when most of the time they want to ask questions and find out what is on the cards for them. And that's something that is so important. And I think we should not web ourselves off as women, because I honestly do believe that a lot of the relationships that we get into that fail should never have started in the first place. And for some of them, we just want to take the positive end of the stick and say, okay, it's a learning curve. At least I went in, I learned this, I'm better, I've grown, and all this other stuff, which is also good. But I also think that you can avoid a lot of unnecessary pain, drama, heartache, and time loss by really having more meaningful initial conversations and fully, exploring what it is really for two people beyond chemistry and lust. I think we're a little too quick to lean into our animalistic tendencies, let me put it that way, or the more like romanticized narratives of what connections should be. Yes, by all means, be attracted to the person. Yes, by all means, pick somebody that, excites you. Yes, pick somebody that is your spec, your type. All these things are important. I will not say they're not, because they are the spark, they are what gets you on, they are what keep you in for some. But by all means, don't also neglect their values, the gender roles, the shared experiences, your love languages, your vision for the future. All these things then, make it a complete and wholesome package where if you say we're aligned on A, B, C, D, E, and Z, then you know exactly what you're going into. You know exactly what you have to do to get to where you want to go, and you're just more equipped. And I mean, I don't say this to say that having conversations or dissecting everything gives you, bliss for the rest of your relationship. It doesn't. Because yes, there are currents, there are torrents, things would happen. You would find that some things are not true, some things are dramatized, some things are underexpressed even. So there'll be a lot of revelations, there will be change, there will be growth, there will be decline. Different things will happen. but at least you're in a position of more preparation because you've put in the necessary work at the beginning. So I think also, some of the blaming and shaming that we do when we're in bad relationships, like, needs to stop, because at some point you have to pause and also think, at what point did you also fuck up, literally? Like, it could be at the beginning, because sometimes we set ourselves up to fail in the sense that that you cannot sustain what you've started, but you start and you go in. Sometimes we go into relationships where we know exactly what the person wants from us. We know that we can't give that, or we can't give it for the rest of our lives, but you go in and hope that maybe the little that you do, the person will be okay. Sometimes you go in relationships expecting the person to change. So someone has shown you, this is who I am, this is what I enjoy, this is what I do, this is what makes me tick, this is what doesn't. And you like 7 things about the person, you don't like 3. So you decide that, okay, I'm going to go in, but I will change the 3. And midway, you find that you can't change the 3. You're not going to use 1 year to change someone's 40 years, of habit or personality. And sometimes even just like genetic temperaments, there are some things that literally they cannot control. So in a situation like this, you've literally shot yourself in the foot. You go in, you make a bad investment, and you feel stuck. Um, and I say all this to say that let's hold ourselves accountable, number one. Let's hold ourselves accountable. Let's be willing to put in the necessary work even before we go like nose deep. Because I know how great, connections are. I don't think there's anything better than meeting somebody and finding that you gel so well, and the high that comes with that connection. I think is the best thing ever. Is like, yeah, that's definitely, I think, my most favorite thing about, the journey of love, the beginning. But I still find it so beautiful that somebody that I literally did not know existed, I could meet, we could have a connection, it could develop, it ended up ending in a marriage, children came out of that marriage, that relationship ends. But it blows my mind to think that that simple meeting of just 2 people from 2 different walks of life, 2 separate beings, found something that made sense to them, found hope or comfort or joy or love with each other, came together, and something as brilliant as kids come out of that, and just how that story develops and the trajectory that it follows, like the legacies that we're building and have built through those kids, like, it's so magical to me. And I think that explorative value in 2 people meeting and what can come out of our unions is like a whole different, you know, world of thoughts that we need to like really explore and like fully untap. Like, I sit here with absolutely no regret for my relationship, because I look at what it's given me, and it overwhelms me all the time. I can never look at that experience and say that was a bad experience for me. I wish it never happened, even though it's ended in tears. Like, premium tears. But I still see the value. It actually makes sense. Like, post divorce, after sharing that experience, people would text me and say, "Oh, it's so crazy that like you have to deal with all this and on top have 3 children." And I'm like, I mean, I don't say it to them, but I'm thinking the 3 children is the best part. The fact that I can look back at that union and not actually feel like I wasted 7 years and got nothing. Not to say that anybody who also has invested in a relationship with all their time and, emotion and everything, and walks away without kids has wasted their life, because I genuinely believe that you can learn so much and you grow so much, and you can improve as a person if you want to. So depending on where you stand, there's always value in a loss. There's always value. But I left that relationship and still felt like, it's like at the end of a race and you get 3 trophies and they're like, "Oh, your race ended." I'm like, yeah, but I have 3 trophies. So moving on, like, what's next? It's to me, it's beautiful. And I think that in itself is like a higher call to order for us in terms of our lens of which we view relationships. And this is even pushing me to even step slightly out of romantic relationships, because I think there's almost an unspoken philosophy of sorts, especially like in our parts, where man needs woman. And I think the man's natural inclination is to always pursue romantically when they meet a woman that meets their standard of taste or beauty or experience, whatever it is that, rocks your boat. And I'm really like, I question that a lot. Like, I question that all the time. At a point, I didn't have male friends because I felt like every male friendship ends up with the guy trying to take it somewhere. And I generally don't believe that every single encounter with a male needs to end romantically, or it needs to end with you exploring it in that sense. And I feel like men more than women have the tendency to always try and go there. It's like, can we not have meaningful connections? Can we not have good friendships? Can we not have relationships that we genuinely learn from and grow from? I dare say every encounter or every relationship that you get into, and it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship, but every male female connection that you have serves a purpose for you. And there's so many men, let me put it that way without sounding like a whore, but like there's so many men that I have dealt with in my personal life, and I am proud to be able to separate the different, let me say, groups or categories that they fall under. I have men or male friendships that have never been romantic connections. They are fully people that I trust, fully people that I love, fully people that I can trust myself with, or trust them with myself also, because I know that they understand what our dynamic is, and I'm not going to be threatened, and my preservation will be intact. And that's difficult to say for the most part, because like time and time and time over, I found that we're very trusting, and most of the time, if someone hasn't proven otherwise, you find that a woman would defend that, oh, he's just my friend. And just time in one experience would teach you that you are wrong. And I've constantly challenged this, like, where's the problem? How does this keep happening? And if you're wondering how this fits into the conversation of unrequited love, it still does, because sometimes the expectation is not necessarily in the sense of, yes, I'm romantically involved with this person and they're not treating me in the right way. Sometimes it's in relationships where one person has been friend zoned and the other person has, higher expectations or different expectations. They may have vocalized how they feel, or they may have not, but they are brooding in that space where they have deeper desires of where that relationship should go, which is not being, mutually realized. And then that becomes a problem. So I think, generally this message is actually more to men. I think men need to challenge themselves more to think outside of romantic expression in their relationships with women, because there's so much more that you can derive out of relationships. There are some people that are married that should never have even been in a relationship, and that's why you're struggling and suffering or like not seeing top of the relationship, because it was not supposed to be. That was not your life partner. That may have been a steady colleague that you would have learned a lot from and grown from. That may have been a good friend that you can call on, when you're bored and want, something different outside of home life, and be able to sit somewhere and have a drink with. Some may have been even people that you could have introduced to other people that and you ended up with them, and now it doesn't gel, it does not work, because there's such a fixation on especially physical chemistry and romantic, you know is it kinetic energy, like romantic chemistry, that kind of longing and sexual desire and tension and all of that. And we're very quick to run with those emotions and, build a whole lifetime on them. And sometimes it's just not meant to be. So I'm really, using this conversation also as a call to self and a call to order in all the different situationships, and there's a lot going on out there. Like, people are in all sorts of webs of entanglement, and you would find that sometimes they themselves won't even enjoy it. They're not happy to be in that space, especially the women. The men, most of the time, they're riding off a wave, they're getting what they want, and the rest is it's what it is, right? But most women, like, speak to someone who's dating a married man who can be honest about how she really and truly feels about what she's doing, the place that she finds herself in. And they would tell you, if they had an honest and humble bone in their body, they would tell you that they wished it was otherwise. Either they would want the person, situation to change so that they can be with them, or they're finding the strength to get out, or they're being held by something that's making it difficult for them to leave that relationship. And there's so many things that also account for that. Speak to somebody who's in an abusive relationship, and most of the time they know. There are very few instances where people do not actually know that the relationship or the space that they're in is wrong for them and is bad for them. And that only happens when there are mental health challenges. But when they aren't, most of the time, we know. We know that it could be better. We know that I could be doing better. I should not be in this space. I should want more from myself. I should have more respect for myself. I should have more courage to leave. I should have more depth than to, stay. And I think it's just the lack of boldness and also the comfortability that some of these scenarios give us. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's, comfort, sometimes it's a lifestyle you can't afford. Sometimes it's even the person. Like, there was someone who is married, but he's nice. He's so sweet to me. And oh, he's so nice and he's so caring and thoughtful. So you've generally fallen in love with the personality of somebody, and on paper it seems great, but technically it's wrong. It's still wrong, and it does not change the fact that the likelihood of that scenario turning out positively for you is extremely low. So I think sometimes we also just need to cut our losses. Not every investment would be a good investment. And I think that's the mark of a good business person. Like, anybody who has been successful in their life will tell you that recognizing when you need to stop is probably one of, the game changers that you can move with in business. So basically, that same application in love, in marriage, in relationships, I think would save us a lot of trouble, a lot of heartache, a lot of stress. Um, but lastly, I think in just tying up my thoughts together, I want us to think about our own honest desires for our relationships. I think sometimes we don't do that enough. Um, we are led by standards, external standards. There are world standards, there are society standards, there are even culturally trending standards. And they may not necessarily be things that fully align with who we are and the real value that we want to create in our relationships. And we should also be mindful of the practices that we institutionalize in our relationships, and, you know, holding them dear, because I feel like who you end up with and what you build in that, close proximity can be so powerful if we truly leaned into partnership as it should be, I think if we go back to biblical, um, the genesis of marriage and relationships, and we're looking at Adam and the need for creating that helper, it was very specific that even God in his wisdom looked at his complete work and still felt that something needed to be added, right? And that thing came being woman, and the union was complete. So man is glorious in his own way. Woman is glorious in her own way. But I feel like the biggest takeaway is what you're able to do together as the union, as the couple, as the partnership. And we really need to lean more and look more into that. Let's not be selfish in our relationships. Let's not be one-sided in our quest for, happiness, because sometimes, like, it's easy to get in and then it's just about you. I want to feel loved. I want her to do this. I want her to do that. Or I want him to do this. I want him to do that. What are you doing in your bid to, seal that union and let that union make sense? So really, with the best of intention, with the best of thoughts, I hope this episode kind of sums up love and how we're journeying through life, how we're going through, our different relationships, from our youthful ones when we were just little girls with big feelings that we didn't understand, and moving into gaining maturity and understanding what love is, and understanding our role in being partners, being support systems to the people that we're with, understanding love languages and how to use them, understanding how to receive love, understanding how to grow love. Um, it I think it's a never-ending wheel that we're on, but it's a beautiful one, and I really do pray that our relationships are able to bring us the joy and the comfort that we desire, because what is the point if not? It's supposed to be where you feel safe. It's supposed to be where you feel heard. It's supposed to be where you feel like yourself. It's supposed to be where you're empowered. It's supposed to be where you feel beautiful, accepted. Um, yeah, it's supposed to be where you're better. And any relationship that takes away from you without giving, without nurturing, without making you grow and shine, is ultimately not the right relationship for you. So on that note, I really do hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope that it spoke to you in some capacity, and that we're just called to be better lovers, to be better girlfriends, to be better boyfriends, to be better partners, to be better wives, and to raise the standard of love. Let's not let love lose. There's value in respecting love, in upholding love, and it's everyone's responsibility to keep things that way. Thank you all for watching this episode. I enjoyed the conversation. I hope you did too. If you did, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. This episode is available on all streaming platforms. Follow us on our social media platforms as well. It's the Bold Circle across social media. Thank you again.